So we're now in week 2 of our Festival of Learning. So I suspect you've heard the script by now, so you're well versed. That this is our annual opportunity to bring members together, share ideas, share learning, and be inspired, hopefully, by what's going on elsewhere in the funding community and with civil society. So it's really great to have you with us. As I mentioned, a few very quick bits of housekeeping. If you can stay on camera, please do. Pop your name in your Zoom name. And we are recording this session just to help us with our learning afterwards, so we won't be broadcasting it, but that's why we're recording it, if that's okay. So yes, so as you know, all about learning this week, and I suppose it's particularly well, it's such a great opportunity that this gives us to also hear from our friends beyond London and the UK. So it's, yeah, delighted that we've got Natalia joining us today from the Centre for Effective Philanthropy, who, as we've just found out, is based in sunny and very hot Madrid at the moment. So welcome, Natalia. Yeah, I'm going to hand straight over to you. So Ori, you can take my spotlight off, and we'll hear from the real deal. So thank you, Natalia. Over to you.
Thank you. Well, very happy to be here today. I guess we're going to do introductions afterwards. Is that then the idea?
Yeah, we can do. Yeah, we've probably got. Could probably do a quick, if you've got time. Could do a quick one. As we're not. Yeah, we're a fairly small group.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, let's do that then after the presentation. So yeah, so I'm Natalia Quintipulo. I work with the Centre for Effective Philanthropy. I'm based in Madrid in Spain. The Centre for Effective Philanthropy is based in the US, but I am here kind of on the European side, leading our work with with European funders. And today I'm going to share with you a preview of the results of a research we have been carrying out using our data set, and we're going to have plenty of time to discuss it as well. There will be a full report at the end of this month coming out, together with some reactions from different funders and kind of a series of blog posts. So yeah. So what grantees are saying and how well are European funders listening is kind of the provocative title here. Not that they're not listening, but maybe they should listen more on many things. Now, very quickly about the Centre for Effective Philanthropy, for those of you who don't know us, we are a not-for-profit organization that has a mission to support funders to become more effective in their practices. And we do this through providing data and insights. And we do this in a number of ways. We create knowledge for the philanthropic sector. We do that through our research, such as the one I'm going to be sharing here today, and through our programming. So we have a kind of a very well-read blog, podcast, and a biennial conference for foundation leaders. We also provide custom advisory services to funders and carry out assessments using the assessment tools that we have developed at CP. And that's probably part of the work that we're most known for, which is our grantee perception report. And this is it uses confidential surveys of grantees to bring learning back to individual funders by understanding their grantees' experiences and also giving them a comparative view by creating a benchmark with other funders. So our current grantee perception report data set has data from over 350 funders with responses from over 60,000 grantee organizations from all over the world. And it is precisely into this data set that we dug into for the analysis I'm presenting here today. And as I said, my role is to work mainly with European funders. And worry not, we do consider the UK still to be part of the European philanthropic sector, if anyone was wondering. And so what I get asked very often is, especially around this benchmarking issue, is like, can we really be meaningfully compared to other funders from other places, especially from the US? Isn't, our context and our culture just too different? And yeah, I've been long enough in the sector. I have my own opinions and stories to tell about this, especially from the grantee side. But we now also have kind of what we know to be the largest data set on grantees' experiences with European funders, and we can kind of bring in some insights from this research as well. So for these findings I'm presenting here today, we analyzed over 5,000 grantee responses from 26 funders in Europe, and we contrasted those with perceptions from over 45,000 grantees of US-based funders. Want to, big thank you to our wonderful, this is grant-supported work, and I just want to say thank you to our funders, including the Paul Heyman Foundation. I see Andy is here today with us, and we also have an advisory group for this research, on which James Banks of London Funders also participates in. Now, did we see differences when we analyzed the perceptions of grantees on both sides of the pond? And honestly, not really, which didn't really surprise me. I have to say there are a few differences here and there, but what really matters for grantees, so things like the quality of the relationships that they maintain with their funders, what they want more or less of in that relationship, does not vary based on the continent where the funder is based. And this is a positive thing because in a way, it allows us to learn across borders and not create those kind of separations. And I wanted here to share just an example of one of the measures that we have in our grantee perception report. So we asked grantees to tell us how clearly the foundation communicates their goals and strategy to them. And as you can see, here we have the distribution of responses on a scale of 1 to 7. And we compare the distribution between European versus US funders. And you can see that the distribution is quite similar. There is variation in grantees' responses, but that variation is not contingent on the location of the funder. What it does show that variation, as also can be seen on these two quotes on both sides of the spectrum from grantees of European funders, is that there are funders on both sides of the Atlantics that have quite some homework to do to improve those relationships and on certain aspects with their grantees. And so, while there are few consistent differences in the quantitative kind of aspects of our survey, I do want to share with you the 3 areas where we did see that grantees of European funders specifically focused their qualitative, so their open text suggestions for their European funders. And the first one is that they're asking for funders to build more intentional relationships with them, both in terms of frequency and the tenor of that relationship. They're asking, for deeper relationships. We do often, when we talk about trust-based philanthropy, for example, we sometimes we make an easy or overly simplistic assumption that grantees just want to be given a grant and be left alone. But what we see from the over 2 decades of data that we have, and also in this specific data set that we've analyzed here, is that the truth is much more nuanced. The grantees do want involvement. They want meaningful involvement with their funders, but they want this involvement to be on an equal footing, to become a true partnership, and where the worldview of the funder is not imposed on them. And we have tons of quotes like the ones that you see here up on the screen, where grantees effectively kind of ask about those deeper relationships that could contribute to and hasten the effectiveness of that of the funding provided. They also want to create relationships that actively counter those power dynamics that are inherently present in that relationship. And this is also related to another aspect that we saw very clearly coming out of the comments, which is that grantees also want meaningful and useful beyond the grant support that is adapted to their needs. And building those deeper relationships can really make a difference in that sense. The second suggestion that clearly comes out is streamlining grant-making processes. And this was an area where we did see some important differences also in the quantitative aspects between the two groups that we analyzed. So grantees of Euro-based funders tend to spend more than double the hours than grantees of US funders when it comes to fulfilling funder requirements, be it in the selection process, but also in the reporting and monitoring processes. And there is also a difference in the monetary return that they receive, for example, for each hour that they spend on these processes. Grantees of Euro-based funders receive just over £2,500 per hour invested, while grantees of US funders receive over £4,000 per hour invested. And if you now see yourself reflected on this slide, one of the things you might want to ask yourself as an organization is, are you getting value that is equivalent of the effort that your grantees are putting into those processes? Are they truly all necessary? Do they really bring that additional value to you and your work? Especially, as this grantee points out in their comment, all these kind of dreaded Excel worksheets and log frames, if I may add, do they really support you in having the view of how things are going, which is ultimately, for example, what is it, one of the things that you want to learn through your reporting. And also, are your grantees getting equivalent value from the effort that they're putting into this? And I'm not talking just in monetary value, but also value for their own learning, for example. Now, coming to the third kind of main suggestion and theme is, unsurprisingly, requests for more flexible, specifically more core operating support or unrestricted support, which still remains, the holy grail for nonprofit organizations. I know there's been lots written about it, and it's in many of our conversations. Every time I'm at a conference, it's one of the main topics that we talk about. Actually, the new Alliance magazine issue that came out last week spends quite some, puts quite some focus on this issue as well. And it is an area where we have seen some change since the pandemic, where we saw a slight increase in the levels of restricted support that is being provided. Yet we are still to see a significant shift in the sector. And this is even more prominent when it comes to the European sector. So we see that in our data set, only 18% of grantees say that they receive core support from European funders, and that's versus 31% of grantees of US funders. And also, as you can see here up on this comment, is that this is an issue. It's always been important and is becoming even more important as we find ourselves at a turning point in our societies. We see, especially in our sector, we see a massive withdrawal from official donors in international development, but also from kind of other areas, even within countries. There are a lot of cuts about what is being funded, what receives government funding. A lot of non-profit organizations are affected by this. We also see withdrawal or philanthropic foundations kind of staying low or pausing their funding. So it does really, gain even more of importance, where grantees are really asking to have flexibility to be able to adapt to this rapidly changing context that they're facing. So just to sum all this up, we don't see major differences between the two sides of the pond, which means that we can all learn from each other despite geographic and at times cultural differences. But there are three areas where, specifically for European funders, there seems to be homework to do, as indicated by their grantees. Build deeper relationships, streamline application and reporting processes, and provide more flexible funding as well as valuable assistance beyond the grant. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Thanks, Natalia. All right, if we come back together as a group, that might be more, yeah, thank you, just so we can see who's here and yeah, have any questions. So Natalia, if we sort of pause and see if anyone's got any thoughts or questions for anything you say. I can see Eric's straight up there, so yeah, Eric. And sorry, I should say, if you've got a question, if you just want to say who you are before we launch in, and we can. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Eric. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Partnerships at John Lyons Charity. We're a funder of children and youth projects in London. Very interesting, thank you. Couple of kind of clarification questions, really. So the suggestion number 2, which is about the number of hours spent on, I don't know if I missed them or not, but was that per year, per grant? Was it dependent on, is it a 3-year, 5-year? Is it just, first of all, what period of time was this, sorry?
Yes, so no, this is it's during the lifetime of the grant.
Okay.
And then it is adjusted by kind of length of grant as well. So on the median, for equivalent kind of lengths, we see that grantees of European funders might spend 55 hours. It's not, it's not equally distributed. Of course, there are European funders that don't have that many process requirements, and for grantees of US-based funders, that's 25 hours.
Yeah, I was thinking, we do 3-year grants, now we do more 5-year grants. I think it will be interesting to know the kind of how that would affect it. But that was in any case a lot of hours spent on monitoring innovation. It clearly was twice as high in Europe compared to America. So that was an interesting take. Also, just a kind of question about the core funding. So this is a conversation that we had at the beginning of time, and we primarily do core funding for our grantees, and I feel that hoping that there's a trend in the UK towards more core funding, but we're still surprised that only 18% of grantees in Europe receive core funding. And I wonder if that's the kind of thing that's different on the continent compared to the UK. I don't know, Ellen, Wayne, and us, if there's a feeling, because I mean that starkly, people spend 55 hours doing reporting and only 18% get core funding. That's not great, whichever way you compare it to America or not. That was my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to say kind of a couple of things. One is that, as I said, this distribution of hours, it varies. So this is just the median. But what it does indicate is that there is an important difference there. And it was also kind of much more prominent in in grantees' comments. So it was one of the kind of the main comments that they make. The most common kind of comment that they make is, please, simplify your processes. When it comes to unrestricted support, we have maybe about 10 or 12, I don't remember right now exactly, UK funders in the data set as well. And I don't think that it is consistent. So like the provision of core support. There are, of course, those that do a lot of core support, but it's not something that we see consistently. Also, this is not a representative data set. It is skewed towards those that do participate in the grantee perception report, but it's still kind of the largest that we have up to date.
Thanks. James.
Natalia, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm James. I work at London Funders with Helen. I was wondering, actually, I have got a clarification question and another question, but I also wonder whether we've got any data on trends data on core funding within London. I don't know, Helen, whether London Funders has that data, because it's a sense that I get is we're talking about it all the time, the need to give flexible core funding. Surely there must be a shift, but I don't know.
On that, before you ask your question, James, yes, we do, and I will try and in the background find out what it says. So we, from our, I guess the source we draw on is our member audit, which many of you will be familiar with, and having just done it earlier in the year. That asks it's from the funder side rather than the grantee side, but asks kind of how many funders are offering core funding as part of their mix. So it might be that it's only a proportion of their overall funding, but I guess we have sort of seen, we can sort of track to an extent if that's changed over time. So I'll see if I can do that and multitask.
While I ask my other questions, so thank you, Natalia. So just a very basic clarification question. The survey is filled out by grantees of European funders, and you're comparing grantees, and you're comparing grantees of European funders with grantees of US funders. Are the grantees also European and US, or are they a real mixture? And yeah, so I was quite.
They're a real mixture. So yeah, what we have been our kind of a unit where we have focus is the funder. So it's the funders that are based, but many of that are based in Europe or in the US, but many of them do international work.
So it couldn't be skewed. The data couldn't be skewed by European grantees just being more critical generally, for example, than US grantees, because it's a mixed. Yeah,
it is a mixed, and we don't have like specific. I don't have specific analysis on this, but there is research done on the issue, and somehow there are kind of like you can find different things out there on the available research. There's a little bit of difference between North and South, kind of mainly kind of northern kind of when it comes to kind of qualitative scales, kind of more how do you call it, less generous on their ratings, but not something we see consistently, I have to say, at least not.
So the big question then is, it looks like the perception of US funders is on the three measures you shared more positive. So there's a bit more core funding, there's a bit more relationship based, there's a bit and so on. And my question is, how do you know how long that's been? Is that a long-term pattern, and what do you think is driving it? Simply.
Yeah, so not exactly. So when it comes to kind of as I said earlier, when we compare ratings about the quality of the relationship, it doesn't really change. It's when we go into the qualitative kind of suggestions, some suggestions tend to be a little bit more prominent. They're also prominent on the US side, but these are kind of the three main suggestions that are made for European funders. The actual differences that we see are more kind of on the more factual side, which are the number of hours and the amount of the percentage of unrestricted support. So sorry, I started talking and now your question was about
it was what so differences aren't great, but there was some difference in the charts you showed between and it was just what you thought was driving that difference, and you know, why US funders might be a bit more open and open to core funding, etc.
Yeah, it's difficult to we don't have insight as much into the reasons on this. This is more kind of a question that we're putting to funders. Some of our members of our advisory group have offered some kind of possible interpretations around that, but it's difficult to, to be conclusive. So I don't want to kind of venture myself and say, this is the reason why and this is not. But we do see that maybe a lot more of, some more conservative approaches, especially on the continental side, a little bit more of mistrust, maybe motivating that. And maybe it also has to do with kind of the overall kind of perception of the role that the philanthropic sector has about themselves in society. But that's kind of like very, these are hypotheses, not and possible interpretations. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I was inviting you to speculate. So that's useful. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And Eric, just before I bring you in, I've just popped in the chat the data from this year from the audit showed, nearly 60% of our members say they offer core funding. Obviously, that's part of a bigger mix of different types of grant, but I would say that feels moving in the right direction. From our side. So don't know how that resonates. Eric.
That's useful to know the current London funders stats on that. So my question really was about the sample. I mean, because I'm just speculating here, because that's what we are doing really. That there's a much larger sample of American foundations, and in my experience, quite a lot of American foundations are based around foundation individuals, whilst many foundations in the UK, and I'm not sure about Europe as such, would be either trusted foundations who don't have a living family involved in it, like ourselves, or semi-public organizations of sorts, where things like the amount of monitoring elevation requirements are probably higher. So, I mean, if you had 10 UK organizations, or 25 in total European organizations, I guess you would be skewed if you had people like the Lottery or Children in Need, organizations that either fundraise or are parastatal organizations, because they have requirements that people like us don't have to follow, or if you are a wealthy billionaire family in America, choose not to do so. Is that something that, I mean, are your members, are the sample, are they trust and foundations, are they families, or are they things like the Lottery? Yes, it wouldn't matter who they are.
They're a mix, so it includes different kinds of funders, from intermediary funders or funders that fundraise to private foundations, endowed foundations, corporate foundations as well. What we have seen in the larger data set, because it's difficult to do this analysis within the European data set only, in the larger data set, we don't see specific differences depending on the type of the funder. So, the typology of the funder. We did see some slight differences when we did an analysis specifically of intermediary funders. and versus kind of endowed or private funders in our data set. And we did see that there is a slight, there were issues more linked to what you mentioned, which is kind of having, well, it didn't come out so clearly in the processes. It did came out in some of the data that they have less room sometimes for less wiggle room. So and that kind of prompted a lot of conversation from back donors and foundations that are supporting these funders about how they can themselves support better their intermediary funders so that they don't have to then reflect those kind of more restrictive requirements to their grantees. But overall, we don't see, if I may, like the big differences we see in our data set are not on location. They're not based on, not even the size of grant so much. Like they're based, of course, on the type of grant making. So is it multi-year and general operating? The value of the non-monetary support that you provide, the perceived value, but most importantly, the relationships between specifically the program officers and how they build those relationships with the grantees. And that's the most kind of determining factor that we see in the overall, let's say, appreciation of grantees of a funder's work, that level of relationship. And it is striking that, for example, in our data set, when we look at the overall data set, the funders that are at the top, we kind of compare, the benchmarking is done on percentiles. The funders that are at the top are not the biggest, nor the foundations that provide the larger grants. Most of them are the foundations that more intentionally build those close relationships and kind of empower their program officers and their staff to build those relationships with their grantees.
Thanks, Natalie. I was going to say, Deanne, if you wanted to, I saw you just put something similar question in the chat. Was there, something you mulling around?
Very similar to Eric's reflections, really. Co-op Foundation, although we are affiliated with the business, we do have quite a lot of independence from the co-op's business, but I've worked for the National Lottery Community Fund previously and absolutely echo Eric's question around the degree of autonomy that a funder may have. I've worked on a European funding programme historically at the National Lottery Community Fund, and despite the fact that they are a quango, they are a third party from government, inevitably some of the requirements of European funding or the Department for Culture, Media, Sport then impact on the lottery's ability to manage grants in a way that would be typical of the way they'd want to. So I think often, even as a big funder, some of your autonomy is restricted by the very nature of getting either governmental funding or European funding. So very similar to Eric's reflections on to what extent, irrespective of the size of your organisation, do you have autonomy about how you manage those grants yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I can't specifically talk to what extent, someone like the National Lottery Community Fund may have skewed or influenced the overall results here, but I can definitely look into it. But what I think that there is something kind of, again, important to be said, which is that on one hand, this is something that we see time and time again. We saw it very clearly in this data set, that grantees do feel that they're being asked to comply and to to report or spend time on processes that they're not only for compliance reasons towards kind of a higher authority, but also sometimes go above and beyond. We also saw that in our intermediaries research, where they were actually asking sometimes for even more requirements than they actually had put on them. It was some kind of trying to be overly cautious in a way. So that's kind of one thing there. The other thing is that well, not the norm. It's not necessarily that if you have high, a lot of hours on processes, that this is something that will reflect badly or kind of on less positive ratings from your grantees. Because I do, and actually we have one of the, when the report will come out, we have one funder that is portrayed there, that they have made the grantee perception report public, which is Archidius, and they are a kind of a foundation that supports social enterprise in countries in the global south. And one of the things that come out that are very interesting is that while they put a lot of reporting burdens to their grantees get a value out of it. So it's not an issue. So that's the important thing. So like they have been using the data that they have. So it's quite onerous for all the grantees to give all that information, to provide all that information to the funder. But then the funder takes all that information and creates a product, a knowledge product, that is useful for the grantees themselves and for the sector, and that the grantees can then use to do advocacy for their sector or to present to other funders. So it's not, again, it's not black and white always. That's what I want to kind of like, overall, we would say, if you're not going to be investing in creating something that is particularly useful for the field, then maybe, and it's just for your internal compliance, maybe you need to think about whether you need all that information. But if you're using it for a higher authority or for accountability purposes, or because you're required to do so, maybe also try to generate value from all that effort.
Thanks, Natalia. So yeah, I guess that we've talked a lot. I think there've been quite a lot of other sessions on that kind of re-looking at the kind of purpose or what all of that data or insight is used for. And yeah, I guess as you said, it not being an extractive process, but there's something very much in it for kind of grantees at the other end as well. Eric, I'll come back to you and see if anyone else.
Yeah, no, agreed with all that. So I guess the thing is, I'm just trying to dig into the kind of the American thing. So I guess the three kind of recommendations, like less onerous reporting, more core funding, better relationship with grantees. I would say that my organization does that. We talk about grant making by walking it out. So we do a lot of kind of pre-development based work of engaging organizations, hopefully not 55 hours reporting, and quite a lot of the grants are core funding. So that's all fine. I guess, like, to a certain extent, I think everyone here would agree that these things are important things and would try to do that. But I'm still interested to see, because there were some quite specific differences from the States to Europe. What does CEP or yourself think is the learn? Is there anything that you would say, this is something the American organizations do different from ours? Or are you saying that it's too unclear to say that? Or would you dare to say, here's the learning and differences, or not?
If I were to venture kind of an association here of different things, I would say that it goes back to what I was saying earlier in the example I was giving about creating knowledge and kind of something of value for the sector. So what we do see, for example, a lot of the funders that we have in our European data set would fall under that category of what you might call strategic funders. Yeah, like funders that have a very specific kind of strategy within a sector. They want to see very specific outcomes. They make their funding available and very targeted to achieve those outcomes, kind of also often investing in building ecosystems and so on. And sometimes with these funders, those process requirements become very onerous because they're very detailed in their approach, both in kind of like the selection process, but also then the reporting process. In the US, also because the pool is bigger, and also we have a lot of the more kind of a family, as you were mentioning earlier, kind of foundations that may not always have, that strategic kind of view on their work. That may also make it easier for them to not ask for as many process hours as those strategic funders do. What happens is that, unfortunately, even those strategic funders, they don't always reflect that learning or make use of that learning for others. They might be using it internally, justify their own, see whether their strategy is working well, or justifying that to their board, having those internal conversations, but it's not then reverted back to the field that they are trying to, that they're trying to build and to empower. So that's where, and to strengthen. So that's where I think could be kind of an interesting point to think about, as a strategic funder, if you're one of them. Again, if you're asking for all these things because you think it's very interesting to understand how this system works, do you then kind of also offer that, build that knowledge for others?
Great, thank you. I'm going to just pause a minute and see if anyone else has any questions or anything has resonated with what you're thinking about in terms of those recommendations. I think as you've said it, and Eric and others have reflected on it, it all feels, I guess, familiar things that we are also talking about in a kind of London context, and things that come up as well from our members and what we hear from grantees. James, I can see your hand up, so I will come to you before I ask my question.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll look forward to your question as well. But I'm going to ask you, Natalia, this probably will require speculation again, rather than something that's specifically data-driven. But I'm just interested in how long you've been doing the survey, and if there are any sort of trends, changes over time that you have spotted.
Yeah.
And that the second part of that question is, have you picked up in any sort of interesting new behaviour or new patterns this year round that might signal sort of changes in the future? Sort of something about change over time. Thank you.
Well, actually, I do have a data kind of driven response to that. So we've been doing that for over 20 years now. So the data set has been, we've been applying the grantee perception report for 20 years. In the data set that we analyzed for this, we only took the 2020 to 2024. And the data set usually only includes kind of the latest data. So a lot of the funders that have been doing it every 2 to 4 years. We only keep the most recent data, of course, in our data set. Now, to your question about trends that we have seen in the grantee perception report over time, we do see that for the funders that repeat, because this is where we can also see kind of more clear trends, we see that most of the funders over time do improve on many aspects, and often these have to do with streamlining processes. And we've seen, all the surge of this kind of trust-based philanthropy kind of idea and movement, and it has been reflected in a lot of these things. And trust-based philanthropy, not in a kind of colloquial sense, but in a very well-defined sense, that it's not about just giving money away, but rather, building deep relationships, providing useful non-monetary support, streamlining processes, and of course providing multi-year general operating grants. So other things that we have seen early around certain turning points. So, for example, around the COVID pandemic, and we did study this, and we have reports that have been on pre-pandemic and post-pandemic practices. And we did compare, we did see very clearly that there was a lot more, significantly more general operating thought. That was being sustained, at least for a while. We haven't repeated that to see if it is still being sustained, but it was being sustained for at least a year afterwards. Same thing with funders kind of making their processes more agile as a response to the pandemic. So funders were kind of quick to respond to the crisis. And in current trends, so since when was it, the 20th of January, the inauguration day, we did see a lot of things, and we just released as well our annual state of nonprofits, which we have a panel of 500 organizations that we survey, and also contrast with funders about how the current situation is affecting them. We have seen what the effects are, all quite within what kind of confirming what everyone was kind of wondering, considering it would happen. Specific patterns that we saw, that we see from funders that we work with, and that's not yet, I don't have that in data, like I can't tell you like percentages, but or specific numbers, but we do know of funders that we work with that they step out payout levels, more board meetings, like more frequent board meetings to have grants approved more quickly in quicker rounds. And also there are those that are reconfirming very openly their commitment to racial justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And on the other hand, those that are quietly scraping all this information from their websites. So we have, and laying low and not talking at all about these things. So we have both sides there.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else got anything on their minds that it sparked? And I guess looking, I think we're all kind of happy to speculate a bit, or I guess think through what these signals are, as you've inferred, Natalia. It's a kind of bit of a turning point, it feels, in how funders are or not, responding to some of these global issues. Deanna, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just going back to point 2 about how long grantees spend on their proposal, their evaluation, and their monitoring processes. Is there any data on where the excessive nature of that reporting sits? So, is it easy to speculate or to surmise whether the disproportionality comes at the start of the process with our application forms? Are they too involved? Are we asking too many questions? Is it happening at the end of the process around the learning points? So, once we've already given the grant, so are you not able to give that information? So just a sense of where in the process, where in the life cycle of the grant are grantees really feeling the pressure? Is it at the beginning, the end, or right across the board?
Yeah, I'm looking at some. I can only tell you what is at the median, if that's interesting. I have like up here, I'm looking at it now. So if I look, for example, at the overall data set that we have, so on the selection process at the median, I don't have it right now. I don't have it separately, so I'll give you just overall. So overall, all our funders in our data set, the median, grantees spend 16 hours on application processes. That's the median. For European funders, that's above. I can tell you it's above 28 hours, and below. I don't know, I can't see it exactly right here, but I know that I can tell it's already like 1.5, almost 2 times more just for the application process. And when it comes to reporting, and that's on an annual basis, at the median is 6 hours, but for European funders, again, is over 10, 12 hours. So again, kind of the double. So yeah, I don't, where does it come from? I think, that speculations we did earlier about, culture, mistrust, maybe board education or types of boards that you have, strategic versus non-strategic funders. We are making hypotheses there, but we don't have, we don't have exact research on the reasons. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a significant difference, isn't it, between those two? So yeah, interesting. We've got a couple of minutes left. So I was just gonna, well, if everyone thinks of any final thoughts they want to share, Natalia, I guess anything, from both the research that you've talked about, but also, the conversations, I guess, you're part of both within Europe and the US. If there was anything, in particular for us here in London and the kind of UK to, be kind of thinking about now, I guess that they're sort of on the radar. We've talked about some of these trends and how they've changed over time, but equally it's quite a turbulent environment at the moment with lots of sort of shifts going on, I suppose, for want of a better way to describe it. So I don't know if is there anything you would kind of want to leave us with in terms of that, is helpful to be reflecting on and thinking about as we go forward.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I don't think I'm in a position to kind of make something like that, but just a reflection also from what I have been hearing about also what has been happening, for example, within London and some of the UK funders, where we have seen some pauses in funding, especially for reconsidering strategies and so on. I do have to say that something that's kind of a lament that we hear a lot from grantees is that please don't take a pause to redo your strategy, but it's very harmful for our kind of work. So if if it is possible to the extent possible to be doing two things at the time. And I know it's not always possible, but also because there's a lot of the funders are also seeing a cut in their own available funding. So it's totally understandable. But, this is becoming a moment of urgency from many people around, but I think, something we haven't seen so much before, but we are now seeing across Europe and the US, kind of more of the Western world. And there are some effects that we are seeing directly on how civil society organizations are operating and providing, the more flexible we can be, I think, is the more we can do to deserve the civic space. Now.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, I think then we're a couple of minutes before 2. So I'll close and just say, thank you to everyone for joining, and big thank you to you, Natalia, for coming to share the research. And you said it's not published yet, but expect to
30th of June.
30th of June. Perfect. So we can, we'll make sure we send it around to people who joined the session, and no doubt it'll be, we'll be sharing it more widely as well with our network. So thank you very much, everyone. Nice to see you. And I should say, don't forget, there's still a few sessions over the next few days. So check out the programme for any of the bits you want to join, and hope to see some of you in person on Thursday at the final session. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you,
Bye.
Bye, everyone.